I've lived in my apartment for about 5 years. About a year and a half ago, I suddenly started noticing that things would be out of place when I got home from work. Things that almost seemed out of place on purpose to mess with my OCD. Sometimes I would notice knives that were put back into the knife block the wrong way, or little ornaments around my house being turned to face the wrong way. Sometimes my clothes were hung up in my closet the wrong way. Little things like that where I would feel like something was off, but there was no way to prove it, and in all honesty, it could have just been me being absent-minded when putting stuff away. After a couple of months of things randomly being out of place, and always having that creeped out feeling, things stopped going out of place. I put it to the back of my mind and stopped being so paranoid and moved on with my life. That is, until about 2 weeks ago. For the past couple of weeks, my cat has seriously been trying to tell me something when I have gotten home from work. Any of you who have a cat will know that exact meow. It's not an "I'm hungry" or "I'm pissed off because you have been at work all day" meow, but an "oh my god, you will not believe what happened" meow, if that makes sense. I didn't really think anything of it because cats can be jerks sometimes, and I just assumed he was bored and wanting to complain. The other day when I came home from work, I noticed a pair of balled up socks that did not belong to me sitting on my bedroom floor. My boyfriend came over the next night, and I told him he had left a pair of his socks here when he had stayed over on the weekend. He looked at the socks and said that they were not his. My heart sank, and so did his. We both knew that someone had been coming into my house again, and that I probably wasn't imagining it the first time. A few days later, I came home from work and found a bag from a lingerie store on top of my couch. It was empty. This bag had come from inside my house, as I had just bought a bathing suit from that store a couple of weeks prior, and the receipt for that was in the bag. At first I thought my cat might have dragged it there, but upon inspecting the bag there were no teeth marks, as well as my cat couldn't have opened my closet door and gone into the paper/cardboard recycling that I keep in there on the top shelf. The final, and perhaps the most unsettling thing happened tonight. My boyfriend met me after work and we went out for dinner. We went back to my apartment after, and I went to unlock my door. I noticed that it was already unlocked. Locking the door when I leave my house is the one thing that I am most OCD about. I don't just double and triple check it, I quadruple check it. It is not just a habit I have, but something that is deeply ingrained into me. Everyone who knows me knows this about me, as I even do it to their doors. I have to check 4 times or I get an icky feeling. Even my boyfriend was on red alert when he noticed my door was unlocked. We entered my house and I was checking to see if anything was out of place. He ran to the sliding glass door and tugged it, and it opened right up. I never leave that door unlocked. He witnessed me lock it on Sunday when I closed the door because it was getting too cold. He saw me check it 4 times. I have not opened it since then. We are both convinced somebody has been in my house. Whoever has been coming in somehow has a key. The fact that they left the sliding door unlocked makes me think that maybe they are planning to come back with ill intentions. I used to spend every day in my best friend's apartment building, which was kind of a weird setup. When you walk into the apartment from the hallway, there is a living room/kitchen area, and then you walked down a hallway where all the rooms were lined up next to each other. She lived in a big apartment building where each unit was set up similarly and shared a balcony with the apartment next door. Both units have a glass door that leads onto this balcony. Due to the layout, in order for each bedroom to have a window, there is an empty space the width of the balcony between the 2 neighbouring units that share it. This also means that your bedroom window directly looks into your neighbour's bedroom window from about 15 feet away. My friend and I were in the living room watching a movie on a Saturday night when one of her roommates scurried into the living room looking terrified. She exclaimed, "There's a man staring at me from the window next door." She explained that all of the lights in the apartment have been off all weekend, so she had assumed all the girls next door had gone home for the weekend. It was a set of college apartments in a dangerous neighbourhood. She had the blinds cracked open and was laying on her bed when she saw movement from the dark room next door. She looked over and there was a pair of eyes staring at her from the dark. At first she thought she was nuts, but a minute later she saw a large dark arm press up against the glass and the eyes emerged again. The lights were already off in the living room, and we all crouched down and gathered around the glass back door to watch the windows of the apartment next door to see if anyone was inside. Sure enough, about a minute through the blinds we saw someone moving around and flicking lights on and off. This made us nervous because he could easily walk out onto the back porch, and then the only thing standing between him and us would be a glass door. We were all freaked out, but reasoned that maybe one of the girls had given her boyfriend a keycard and he was the one inside. On the other hand, the apartments were super easy to break into. You swipe a card down the lock and you're in. There were about 50 units in the building and a huge problem with robberies. The next day, I was over again and we heard the girls come home. We went out onto the back porch and knocked on their door. When we told them what happened, their faces went pale. They explained that nobody was home and nobody should have been inside the apartment. After informing the building manager of what happened, they all gathered their belongings and went somewhere else for the night. Unfortunately, the building manager didn't give a shit or do anything about it. A few months later, everyone moved out. Nobody knew who that man was or how he got into the building in the first place, since there is a security guard sitting at a desk by the front door. So, creepy dude who broke into the apartment next door and stared through the window, let's not meet. I'm Jewish and I wear 2 items of jewellery which I am very attached to. One is a thumb ring inscribed with a prayer in Hebrew, and the other is a disc inscribed with a Hebrew blessing and a gold Star of David in the centre. I was heading home, and right outside my apartment building an older man came up to me and asked for $1. I don't carry cash, and I told him that. He looked quite aggressive and was probably very high, so when he told me to sit on the wide bench, I did. In hindsight, I should have walked away, but he was definitely high on something that made him very aggressive, and I'm a somewhat shy person. I was planning on ignoring him in favour of a cigarette and my book, and then quietly slipping away. That did not happen, as he immediately started insisting I take him inside to show him my apartment. There was no way I was doing that, and I repeatedly declined, getting increasingly annoyed the more often he insisted, slurring the entire time. He asked for my name. I lied and gave him a fake name. Anytime I made a movement to leave, he would put his arm in front of my chest. I hate being touched, but I was too shocked, confused, and annoyed to tell him off. Within just a few minutes, I was very annoyed and feeling harassed. I stood up too fast for him to react, and then he spotted my necklace. He got very excited and asked me how much I'd sell it for. It is not for sale, and I told him so. He threatened to slit my throat if I didn't sell it. I ran away. I decided against going in through the front door, as you don't need to use your coded card to get inside during the day. I opted to go around the back of the building and use the back door, which requires the card at all hours and the doors shut faster. I spoke to one of the guys at reception about half an hour later, and he wrote down some notes to give to security. If they see him again, they will ask him to leave and call the police if he does not. It's definitely not the first time I've been harassed, but it is the first time I've been harassed by someone definitely high. It's also the first time someone has tried to force me to invite them inside my own home. To pay off the mortgage, my family built 2 granny flats in our backyard and had been renting both out. At first this concept was terrifying, strangers living on our property. It felt like a blatant invasion of my privacy. Fortunately, the real estate agent and my dad both found kind old men to live in either granny flats. Now, we were familiar with one of the men, as he was previously living in our neighbourhood and would greet us if we walked past each other or engaged in small talk. The only issue was that he's a non-functional alcoholic. He's always been kind to me, despite having some horrible habits. He's racist, homophobic, etc. This often gets him in trouble. One time my mum had to patch him up after a solid beating and he got disowned by his family. My parents are immigrants themselves and tend to overlook his views. They even lowered his rent out of pity. We honestly thought he was a good guy, just a victim of circumstance. The first real red flag for me was when he coaxed me into coming into his granny flat under the ruse of finding his phone. Instead, he locked the doors and proceeded to show me his stash of opioids and injectables. He was trying to engage me in conversation about various medical issues. I have a medical background and he was previously a night nurse. In order to escape, I had to call my brother without the tenant and leave the call running so my brother could hear me ask to be let outside and overhear the conversation. Being a victim of sexual abuse twice left me fairly shaken up. Since then, I have refused to engage with this tenant alone. Recently, the final straw for my family came when we started noticing some odd things outside our house. My dad found blood in his room that no one could explain. I would hear footsteps inside the house when I was alone during the day. These would simultaneously cause our little puppy to go into guard dog mode. And then 2 hours ago, my mum was home from work, unusual for her, and she suddenly hears the door open. Someone steps in and sits down on the couch. From my mother's recollection, she ducked inside the pantry and watched as our trustworthy tenant walked around our house, avoiding rooms that had noise emitting from it, i.e. my brother is home due to injury, watching TV, and our dog is in there too. However, he did peek into my room while I was sleeping, directly opposite the kitchen and visible to Mum, before sitting back down on the couch. My mum soon confronted him, kicked him out, and regained composure from what she could only describe as a near-damn heart attack before going to his granny flat. The man had no recollection of entering our home 10 minutes ago, playing dumb with lines such as,
"Was I really in your house? Did I do that? I don't remember doing anything wrong."
What's evident is that this wasn't the first, second, or third time. I had not long been awake when a loud knock sounded from our front door. As I stood on the landing, I could hear my mother open the door and begin joking with whoever was there. I couldn't make out much of the conversation, it didn't concern me too much. According to my mother, he had a parcel for us and wanted her to sign for it. He had no pen, so she began to close the door so she could go and fetch one. Suddenly I heard my mother scream loudly. There was a man's voice shouting too.
"Police! Police! This is a raid!"
I was so shocked I ran halfway down the stairs to see what was going on. I could see a man in his 50s with short hair and a beard wearing a fluorescent orange vest. He was standing almost in our doorway. My mother was screaming, trying to shove him out. He was clearly no police officer. Instinct kicked in. I threw myself down the stairs and against the door. My mother repeatedly hit the man in an attempt to shove him out. I screamed as loud as I could to try and attract attention, but nobody came to our aid. We managed to shove him out of the door with our combined force. We had the door almost shut when suddenly a large shove threw it back open. I was thrown back and my hip collided with the corner of our electric meter cupboard behind the door. Before I knew it, there were two men, the orange vest-wearing man and another dressed in a black coat that obscured most of his face. In a blur of screaming, hitting, and shoving on the door, we managed to get them out again. My mother realized that they wanted the fake parcel back. She picked it up and threw it at their heads. This time, instead of trying our door again, they hurried off around the corner of the street. Once the door was locked, I asked my mother if she was alright. Both of us were shaking and could barely breathe. We should have called the police right away, but the first thing we did instead was to call my dad. I was in complete shock, concerned mostly about my mother, who was crying on the phone. My dad came home from work immediately and came in to see us while we called the police. We put in a report and gave statements. The police couldn't find any fingerprints on our door despite everything that had happened. We gave them the CCTV from our front window. It didn't get everything, but it got a good shot of both of their faces. We couldn't stay in the house after that. Every time there was a knock at the door, I would feel so afraid that I would start crying hysterically. We moved out a month later. Even now, 3 years later, I am still suffering after this event. Knocks on the door make my heart pound in my chest. Though I now have the courage to answer, I am always afraid it may happen again. Every time I see someone wearing a fluorescent vest, I get so scared that I start to shake. The police did nothing, despite the fact that my mother broke 3 fingers in the struggle and I came away with bruises. Our case was shelved after 6 months. We still have no idea why they chose us. We don't know what they had planned or who they were. I still feel sick every time I think what could have happened to us if they had succeeded in getting into our house. So, creepy guys who tried to break into my house, let's not meet.